Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for the closing panel titled The Impact of Coronavirus on Leadership and the Workplace and the New Normal of Work. On this panel, we have a lot of industry heavyweights with an experience mix of, I think, well over 200 years in the field of HR. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce the members of the panel. Ira Gupta, Head of Human Resources India, Microsoft. Dipti Verma, Director, HR, Amazon. Adesh Goyal, Chief Human Resources Officer, Tata Communications. Animesh Kumar, Chief People Officer, Z Entertainment. Yuvraj Srivastava, Group Chief Human Resources Officer, Make My Trip. Amit Vaish, Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer, Kotak Life. Priyanka Anand, Vice President and Head HR, Southeast Asia, Oceania, Ericsson, India. And this panel will be moderated by Ron Thomas, Managing Director, Strategy Focus Group, UAE. Ron, over to you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and welcome everyone to the closing segment of the conference. So that means we've got to hit a home run. Our topic today is the panel, the impact of the coronavirus on leadership and workplace and the new normal of work, if there is such a thing. So we'll kick this off by looking at our first question centered around leadership during this pandemic. And the question is, what has been your toughest leadership challenge during this pandemic? And what was a major learning point from it? So let's just go around the horn. Depti, you want to start us with that one?
Absolutely. So as you all know, Amazon has a very varied kind of workforce. We have people in business, we have people in operations, technology, we have people who come and deliver at your home, at your doorstep, people in data centers, AWS, as well as people who work on devices and labs. It was not easy for us to enable each of this workforce to work from home, and because each of them had their own varied kind of needs. So for us, the most important and most challenging thing was to stay connected with our frontline employees to understand what their needs are. And as you know, that government was trying to communicate with all of us on a real-time basis. So we needed to work on the strategies as to how do we enable this workforce who is so varied and make them comfortable working at home. The second biggest challenge that came our way was the fact that we wanted to really get real-time feedback about how are they feeling, what are their stress levels, are there things that we can do differently for them, how are they feeling about being at home alone, because quite a lot of workforce stay alone. So as you know, Amazon is a very technological savvy company. We had a kind of tool which we've been implementing it for quite some time called Connections, where a question pops up on your computer every day to understand how your engagement with the company, your engagement. And we decided to change those questions to COVID-related questions. And we started asking employees about, is your manager giving you flexibility to work from home? Is your productivity quite okay? Are you comfortable working from home? And that gave us a lot of data to work on, come up with action item in real time, change some of the things which were very important for employees. So I'm sure we don't have all the answers, but what helped us was that we all came together as a team and we started working backwards from our most important customer, which are our employees.
Oh, I really like the idea of the pulse survey. I really wish we had more time to spend on that. But anyway, thank you for that insight. Adesh, would you like to take that question and give us your insights? Okay, let's skip that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So, you know, Tata Communications is a company. We have customers in 200 countries. We have employees in 40 countries. And our network, undersea cable system, fiber on the ground, under the ground, and wireless actually is managed by vendors in a fully managed service format. And we realize that if they are not working, then nothing is going to be managed. And that was the biggest challenge, right? And especially in India, a lot of those employees of our vendors, we have about 200 of them, were migrant workers, and they were facing a lot of challenge. So for us to work with them, collaborate with them, and create safe environment for them, we had to really partner with our vendors. Over 20,000 employees they have, and that was the biggest challenge. And we had to really create some quick technology solutions to help manage that situation, and also make sure that we funded their healthcare and life insurance and stuff like that, which was really not available to them. And my biggest learning has been that, these are the people who really play a very, very important role in running our operations. And post-COVID, we would be really working on how to make their lives better, how to develop them, how to make sure that they have a good working environment and life.
Okay. I interviewed a CEO last week, and one of the things he talked about was keeping a journal each and every day, capturing the learnings from that. And he said he's got a binder full, which he plans to put together in some type of document, a learning environment going forward. So that's great. Thank you so much for that. Animesh, give us your insights.
I think there have been a whole bunch of issues, Ron. And while there is infrastructure and various other resets that have happened, I think for me personally, the biggest leadership challenge, and the one word that describes it, is balance. How do you balance between personal commitments and professional commitments? How do you balance between not having the answers and yet providing leadership for the entire organization? How do you balance between individual needs and organizational priorities? How do you balance the organization between, and now we are almost on the verge of reopening, how do you manage employees about getting back into the workplace and yet create momentum for getting business back on track? So the single word that has really encapsulated my entire challenge would be balance.
Okay, cool. It's a great metaphor. Thank you. Yumaraj.
Yeah, Ron, so thank you so much. And first, great to be in the August company of such learned professionals, and thanks to ET for inviting. Coming quickly to the topic or the question what you're asking, Ron, I think that I'll not go to the prologue of what's going around in terms of work from home and what sort of a stress people are facing. We are an organization, Make My Trip, Go IBBO, and Redbus, which is every day an organization which runs to get the business. It's a very, very strong, B2C e-commerce platform wherein, a huge amount of competition. And I think huge amount of development and changes happens not only in terms of customers, but also with respect to employees, workforce. You need to ensure that your people are retained and they continue to be productive. So if I have to really talk first about learnings in this whole process, I would of a change management overnight. I think also in terms of learning, what I have felt is that in terms of a talent, Ron, we all have been always running after our high potential employees in the company. I think that every conversation happens about who are the great employees, who are the people who need to be rewarded. But what my learning had been in the current context, your solid citizens, people who had been integral to the organization, people who had been strong in terms of, working, loyal to the organization. These are the guys who basically help you create an environment in the system. And also that's how things really change rather than really. So I think that learning is that we need to really ensure that you take care of different set of employees in a very, very different way. And third learning, what I feel has been, is a power of honest conversations. You talk to employees in the workforce honestly, people rally around. We did a salary rationalization right in the month of March when everything started. We started talking about it, and you will not believe the amount of mails which actively landed in my inbox saying that you are talking percentage. Why can't you really go beyond this percent and do that? So I think honest conversations, talking to people, we always pull ourselves back. I think it's very, very important. I learned that you talk to people, people will rally around. Don't get into the bureaucratic process of saying something and doing something. So that's something which I felt these three learnings, Ron. And challenges, if I have to talk, as you said, very briefly, I think one is a CFO versus CHRO, point of views, a challenge. And when I'm saying CFO versus CHRO, it is not to do with the roles. It is more to do with how you drive the organization, how you contribute. CHRO, we also did a bit of right sizing in the organization. How you look at money, how you look at cash flows, how you look at emotional sentiments of people becomes very, very different. How you balance between these two different objectives of these two functions was a huge challenge. I think it worked, and finally it basically worked. I'm sure that everybody is talking about managing short term versus long term. Do you want to really have a war chest for future, or you want to really spend money and pay salaries to people? I think it was another challenge which, as a leadership, people had to really manage. And I think that all these have been learnings, whether you call it a challenge or a learning, but a huge evolution for every professional who has been a part of last 3 months in any organization, if I have to say that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that insight. Amit.
Hi, Ron. Thanks so much. Delighted to be on this panel with lots of old friends and acquaintances. So I think my most significant leadership challenge, I think, out of this phase was undoubtedly managing, the employee motivation and engagement issues in the early part of this crisis, which is effectively, from an India perspective, I think the second half of March. And while I wasn't alone sort of managing this crisis, we had by then set up a crisis management group comprising the senior most leadership of the firm. I think what made it particularly challenging is the fact that it caught us off guard completely, right? None of us had quite anticipated, I think, the impact of the crisis or what shape it would take over a period of time and what that would mean for the business as a whole. But at the same time, we were expected to respond overnight, which wasn't sort of easy because nobody really had all of the answers. And I think what became apparently clear as the weeks rolled by is that our response in that early phase would really determine how we would come out of the crisis as a business, as an organization, on the other side of it. So it was extremely important. I think, the domestic financial services, if I just give some context to our insurance business, March tends to be a very big month because that's when a lot of the tax saving and investment decisions are made by people at the end of the financial year in India. And, 25-30% of the annual sales are typically backloaded, right down to the last month. And I think second half of the month was a washout, so to say, because the lockout had just been imposed, people couldn't meet, you just couldn't go and reach out to customers. The industry as a whole saw a contraction, right, which resulted in a lot of loss in terms of incentives or bonus earnings or commissions of the workforce as a whole. So you can pretty much imagine what the state of the mind or morale of employees would have been at that point in time. And just getting them to stand up, look ahead was a task in itself, right? So that, I think, was probably the most challenging phase of this crisis. And what are our key takeaways? What are our learnings for myself and for an organization? I think most significantly, the fact that employee resilience, workforce resilience, is probably as important as infrastructure or real estate or technology resilience. Like today, we talk about work from home to mean that connectivity should be available, to mean that IT systems should be robust and everybody should be connected. But the fact is, when you think about the composition of the workforce itself, right, you have a bunch of critical skills, very important roles that are either customer support centered, that are regulatory compliant focused, and generally keep the wheels of the business running. You've got to find a way in which concentration risks, in which attrition risk, in which you try and constantly have backups for some of those skill sets that are vitally important to keep the engines of the business running. So it could mean that you either set up distributed concentrations of employees, have multiple locations, look at vendor backups, etc. So I think all of those go into driving what I would call an effective, resilient strategy for the workforce. The second learning to me, I think, is a bit of a reflection on, I think, the HR agenda as a whole. Because, I've come across this comparison so often that the financial crisis of 2008 was pretty much a CFO moment, right? It was CFOs who effectively steered their organizations out of the woods. And it's safe to say that I think for this pandemic, the CHRO probably plays as important a role because workforce well-being, safety, precautions are pretty much front and center. I think this is the opportune time for us to really press forward on a lot of those aspirational agenda items, future-looking, forward-looking agenda items, which are always important but not urgent. I mean, this is a time when people will listen to a good, workforce program, and whatever it is that you consider aspirational, whether work from home or digitization or upskilling, etc. Now is the time. So I think don't let the crisis go waste, as they say. So those are my.
That makes me think of a quote. It's the best of times and the worst of times. It's the best of times if you have the skills to step up. Worst of times if you don't have the skills to step up. So thank you for that insight. Ira Gupta, give us your thoughts on the question.
Thanks very much for having me here. I appreciate it very much. I think for us, it's not at Microsoft, it isn't really one crisis. We're thinking of it as 3 stages of a crisis. And I think the leadership challenges at each stage are going to continue to evolve. So I don't necessarily think we have all the answers yet. I think the 3 crisis stages for us are, we're thinking of it as respond and then recover and then reimagine. And I think in the response stage, as we first began to see the scale and the impact of what is hitting us, I think some of the biggest challenges revolved around identifying the signal in all the noise, because I don't think that was immediately apparent. I think there was a lot of fake news, and just discerning basic credible sources of data was important to understand the extent of the issue that we were all going to face. I think the other was just there were so many disparate opinions, very little knowledge, but so many disparate opinions at the outset on what the future would hold and how it would unfold. It was difficult to be able to figure out even a game plan in the middle of all of that. And so essentially, I felt we were all navigating an unknown sort of territory. And what we really needed, therefore, to do at that time as a leadership was to pressure test how working in a remote model, entirely 100% remote model, would work. And so we started to try things out a lot before, sort of a little bit of time, not a little bit of time before the lockdown was actually imposed, so that we would be more ready for when it did get imposed. So we tried a few things, we pressure tested a few things, and we ended up realizing that because we are a technology company at Microsoft, we might be ready from a tech perspective. But we need to be more ready from a leader and manager readiness perspective. Essentially because we expected that this would happen over an extended period of time, and the ability to manage 100% virtual teams and the leadership and management energy that is required to do that, and the thought that is required to do that, is novel. And so really the leadership thinking at that point was, how do we create clarity? Not only for our own employees, but also for customers who we serve, because we serve a lot, for partners who we work with, and for the broader ecosystem. So that was the first. In the recover phase, I think as we are going to recover from this, we will need to now ask leaders to pressure test some of the assumptions that they've made for their own business plans. Because we don't know whether those plans are going to fructify or not. This is new territory for us all. And so as we do this, what we at Microsoft are certainly thinking about is keeping the customer at the center of our recovery plans. Because there are so many first responders who are dependent upon the technology we provide, that they have to be the center of how we think. And so we want to focus on the opportunity to empower our customers and to be relevant really. And we certainly want to focus on what it is that they need and how as an organization we can respond to their recovery needs. That's really important to us. And finally, I think there is an opportunity for us to reimagine. It's what you said, it could be the best of times if we choose to think with that sort of hat on. And so I think this has certainly been what we think of as an accelerator for digital transformation. But I think it's also going to almost force an innovator's dilemma. Are we willing to give up what we know, to invest the efforts of the organizations to operate in a completely new environment? It's going to be a very interesting challenge as we think about that. And at Microsoft, we have had to rethink about the help our customers are going to need. We're thinking about it every day, all the time, and it's hitting us in new ways, right? This information and our response to it. And therefore, before we think about how our revenue for the year will line up, we've got to think about how our customers are going to need for us to be in order to serve them. And that has to be what we choose to do. And so these are all hard choices. They're going to be new choices. They're going to require tons of new thinking. But I think they're going to help us reimagine a completely different reality.
I love the 3 R's. I wrote that down. That's pretty cool the way that you phrased that in the 3 phases. Mine was different, but I love the 3 R's. So I'm going to use that. I'll send a royalty check over. So Priyanka, give us some insights from your side.
Great, thanks, Ron. So for us as an organization, we've always invested in a growth mindset. And this to us came quite handy because when we were confronted with this pandemic, as leaders, we chose to reshape the situation and take it as an opportunity versus a crisis. So what was important was that we recognized that leaders had a strong role to play when we approached the situation. What we did was we ensured that we had a good recognition of the fact that employees were experiencing very high levels of stress, much higher than they would have generally done. On top of it, there was a clear need for our leaders to be empathetic towards our employees. So empathy bundled with sensitivity about the stress that the employees were going through was an important approach that we went with. At the same time, there was a huge amount of commitment back to the customers that we were responsible for to keep business continuity as well as productivity at high levels. So what we really did was, and like Adir said, the golden word here was, how did we strike an ideal optimal balance between being empathetic as well as ensuring that we are getting business continuity to not get impacted. So with those two together, we continue to look at the situation. We also looked at how would we get our leaders to ensure that business continuity is being not hampered with overnight 85,000 employees in Ericsson getting to work from home or remotely. And then on top of it, what was most important was leaders had to step up and create that safety net of employee well-being for our employees. So we ensured that leaders were both connecting, communicating, like Yuvraj said, very important that communication was two-way, real-time, dynamic, as well as we were trying to understand what do they need from us to provide the right ecosystem to stay productive. So to me, those cornerstones of being empathetic, ensuring business continuity, and driving balance became the cornerstone of how we looked at the leadership role in this situation.
Yeah. You use the word empathy, and you see when you read articles about leadership now, that word is used. It's kind of becoming a buzzword, but you're exactly right. So our first question focused on the leadership level. Let's take it a step down to employees. And the second question is coming about is how are you maintaining engagement for your workers, whether it's essential workers or the normal workforce? And what are some major takeaways from your efforts inside of your organization? So let's start the same way that we did last time. Depti?
Sure, thank you. So first and foremost, our employee safety is paramount to us. And what we've done is that we've done a lot of changes in our workspace in order to maintain that safety. And all of you know that we have deliveries that are happening. So it is very important for us to look at the safety of the employees who are delivering to you, who are bringing smile on your face. I'm sure some of you must have read about it. 3 days back, we've kind of launched something called as distance assistance, which is we've put that machine learning AI kind of a tool in our some of our workspaces in order to see that people are maintaining 6 feet of distance. And this tool is very, very important for us because we have people who are coming every day to the office to deliver, so we need to maintain those distances. So this gives us a real time information that people are maintaining it or not maintaining it. And while we've just piloted it in some of the workspaces that Amazon has, we are going to take it across. In fact, taking it step forward, we want it to be like an open source so that if other companies want to emulate and try to do something, it would be most important for us. That said, uh, at a grassroots level, we realized that we need to offer a lot of things to employees in order to make them feel good. So like many other companies are doing, we were doing webinars, we were doing, all sorts of affinity groups where people were talking about exercise, food, working moms, and so on and so forth. But what set us apart was the fact that we gave a lot of flexibility to our workforce to decide what are the ways in which they want to work. And that was very important. So in fact, we said it is not important that you need to follow a schedule or things like this. You decide what works for you, and you go ahead, and we will respect that. So we've been trying to give a lot of that flexibility, and that has helped us in long way. And that results show in the connection survey that I was talking to you about, where we have had people who have said, my productivity has improved, my flexibility has improved, my manager has given me the time to balance my personal and professional things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Adesh?
Thank you, Ron. And actually, surprisingly, employee engagement has been very, very easy for us. We have a digital platform for learning. We call it Tata Communications Learning Academy. And 90% of the nearly 90,000 training days that we did last year were digitally delivered. So the moment this happened, we were able to quickly create pathways for employees on how can you work well remotely. How do you balance personal and professional, etc. We were able to quickly create pathways for managers and leaders to on how they can manage remote teams, how can they engage remote teams, and we saw really good usage of that. We launched daily, twice daily, so that we can cover all time zones. Mindful meditation sessions so that people can understand how can they manage their mind and use meditation to cool things down so that they don't feel stressed. And then after live sessions for 3 weeks, we actually use the Tata Communications Academy to make it on demand. And we use technology so that people could, we sent customized invites to everyone based on their time zones so that they can choose the time they want to do it on a daily basis. So that worked quite well. We actually created a lot of fun elements, themes like virtual weeks, virtual, theme. People would come into a meeting wearing, for example, in our team, in the HR team, people created a theme of super men and women. So I don't know from where people found in the lockdown. Maybe they stole their children's gears. I was amazed at the creativity of people. Some people had exotic location for the meeting, and people was created, within their houses or just outside. So it created a lot of fun, right? People are having daily meetings. Nobody used to say earlier, are you safe? Are you fine? Now everybody's saying that. So this, I think it has become a little bit more humane.
Yeah.
And we do our annual survey, employee engagement survey in February. And we actually are fortunate to have a very, very good top quartile engagement. And then we did it after 6 weeks of COVID. And we were pleasantly surprised. Our engagement actually went up by 10%. So one of our learnings is that during crisis, people cooperate better. People are thinking of bigger issues rather than personal issues. So that, I think that if we are able to create a congenial environment, we are able to give people freedom. And I think this whole digitization really helps us be very, very, very agile, right? You can do something new every day. And distribution is not a problem. Consumption is not a problem because the channel for that is already set. And the Tata policy is in terms of safety, that safety, it doesn't matter what the economic consideration is. Yeah. So every day in our daily BCM meetings, we emphasize that, right? That we have to empower the employees to say no if they're not feeling safe. And, thank God it's been quite good so far.
Yeah. If I can step in for a second, one of the things that I'm noticing from my end is that companies that were of a fixed mindset, I said an organization has a fixed mindset, are realizing that that can't succeed moving forward. And they're loosening up a little bit. And so they're kind of transforming to that other side, a growth mindset that was mentioned earlier. So thank you for that. Animesh.
I think our response has been, you could really break it down into two parts. One is structural, and the other is manager-led. I'm not going to spend too much time because it's obviously covered the entire gamut of responses of a lot of communication led from the top and then obviously broken down at individual manager levels. I think the important thing to understand is the criticality of role that the managers play in situations such as these. We've been investing in our frontline managerial capability building, and that helped us a lot during this time because it's the manager reach out to the individual employees that I think has really helped us navigate this crisis incredibly well. But I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on one thought or one concept, which I thought had really made a big difference to the employees in Z and pushed the envelope and created a slightly differential, a different way of looking at the entire situation. And we called that WFFH, WFFH, which was work for and work from home. The idea was to recognize that as people have moved to home and in this crisis, with the entire help ecosystem falling away, recognizing the fact that people are now playing multiple roles. Gender roles are getting blurred. And in a society such as ours, gender roles still tend to be fairly well defined. So exhorting all our employees and recognizing that everyone is doing this work from home and work for home, that concept really resonated incredibly well. That simple acronym and pushing that agenda in every narrative, every communication that we led, really changed the nature of dialogue between the employee and the organization. It helped us establish our empathy, our understanding, and our insight with the employees that, look, the organization gets what's coming, what's happening. Engagement is being done with all the other things. We had Hello Z and all kinds of structural interventions, but that was what really, I think, changed the perception on the ground.
Okay, cool. I like the acronyms. Thank you for that. Yuvraj.
Yeah, Ron, thank you so much for the second round. For employee engagement, I think clearly a takeaway from me, or at least insight, that engagement is not or can never be uniform for everyone. I think in doing something remotely for the whole bunch of people sitting at home may not really keep everybody glued and also everybody really engaged with the organization, And I also started realizing that the people who are productive at home have a very different personality type. If you go into the details of it, some people like to be productive being at home, working alone. They are far more diligent in terms of working. Some people derive energy by being around in the office, meeting people, doing things. And in this scenario, if you do certain things sitting at one location and try to engage everyone, was something which was difficult and challenging. And I can honestly say that, I don't know how did we really manage. The teams really did some of the work within the team framework to engage people or interact. But what centrally we drove a concept is, and also because we are a young organization, we need people to stick around. We are in a competition wherein the talent, attrition happens. So we worked on a approach of creating a pride in the organization with a part of the organization you are. We finished 20 years in this April. We have been working a lot in terms of saying make my trip 20 year. We also, fortunately, incidentally, we are the ones who basically conceptualized and designed the Arogya Setu, which most of us are using. And we presented it to government, Prime Minister's office, Niti Aayog, finally a lot of other organizations also came in. So we worked, a whole set of 40 to 50 people were working on this project diligently, morning till evening, not sleeping for more than 3 to 4 hours. So there was a lot of work happening internally. And we also drew, creating a pride in the minds of employees that you are a part of a great organization, which is contributing at a national level. We also activated a lot of our CSR activities in work with respect to COVID-19 support, creating a hospital, creating a system for checkups for a lot of people who are connected with the travel tourism process. So I think that was one way of really engaging people. And second, we also told people that we are a fast-paced organization. You don't get time to do things which you want to do to add value to yourself and to the organization. So business as usual, while it is slightly down, or rather it is absolutely down. We had 85%, 90% business down. The people have done tremendous amount of work on some things which they could never focus on. The type of product features which have got created, technology engineers, the type of machines they have created. HR team itself must have done on various projects deployed to do things which can completely change the way HR works. So I think focus was more to deploy people on work which can keep them engaged and they can derive satisfaction and make use of this opportunity. And on the other hand, clearly creating a pride about the organization which they are part of. And I think that till now it has been successful.
Well, that's amazing. One reference point: the CEO that I interviewed of the hospital in Abu Dhabi told a story around nurses, non-title nurses, not a nursing manager, whatever it was, and he was amazed by the number of non-leaders stepping up in leadership roles and just taking things on upon themselves and creating a system or whatever it was to make the overall objective of that department work a lot better and connect more. Individual people just stepping up to the plate. Yeah. So that's cool. Amit.
So Ron, I heard, on this point, I heard Priyanka say this earlier, and I totally endorse that. I think this is a phase in general where employees have been more overwhelmed than they have ever been in the past. Yeah. And I think when you talk about running the business or managing workforce engagement or care for employees, I don't necessarily see the two as being separate, right? They are very, very closely linked. They're virtually inseparable. And I think more so in this phase than ever in the past. I think we need to appreciate that we are not yet out of the crisis. There is an uncertain future. And I think that uncertainty today is as real as it has ever been, in the past, a couple of months in the past. So I think, and more this prolongs, the greater will be the need to really step up or ratchet up, I think, the levels of engagement and investment that we will need to make into the workforce, for keeping them fully geared towards facing some of those uncertainties. So, I spoke about the fact that our business, got a very direct hit in the first few weeks of the crisis because people just couldn't step out, meet customers, clients, and that saw a contraction in the industry as a whole. I think as an immediate response, one of the things that we did is for the following quarter, beginning April of this year, we recalibrated our business metrics, right? We recalibrated them to make them more realistic. We recalibrated them to allow employees an opportunity to shore up their incentive earnings or bonus earnings, which they had lost out in the previous quarter. And I think that has worked tremendously well to restore that confidence in the employees and make sure that, we demonstrate care and concern for them. And at the same time, they remain customer focused as we would expect them to be. So that has worked really well. I think my greatest takeaway from this experience is really what I call getting the balance between optimizing for today and creating value for tomorrow, right? It's a very delicate balance to do. And as I look around, a number of organizations are actually in that space where they're grappling with how to get this equation right, for themselves. And it's that classic profit versus, purpose debate that you have. Do you, when confronted with a difficult decision to take, in a services business where 60-70% of your costs tend to be people cost, when you've got to manage sustainability of the business in the shorter term, do you take some of those difficult decisions and then regret 6 months later when there's a bounce back, or you need to be in a position to sort of come out stronger? Or do you defer those decisions to a later point, hoping that the crisis would end sooner than later? It's not an easy decision sort of to make, but I think some of those answers lie in trying to get the employee side of the equation right for you. And I think that's where engagement programs, retention programs work wonderfully well. It's a very delicate balance, like I said. I think it goes beyond thinking about just getting your bottom line right in the next quarter, next 90 days, but really focusing on what the core purpose of an organization is. And I fundamentally believe, I think those who stay closer to their purpose will come out as greater businesses at the other side.
That's the other big word: empathy, purpose. Ira.
I think of it almost like a hierarchy of needs. And I feel that at the basic level, there's a lot that initially needs to be done, or we did, in terms of making sure employees were safe, that their families were safe. We have a lot of employees who had recently transferred or joined us who were still in hotels and so on. So there's a lot to be done in terms of just maintaining the safety and security of your workforce, including those who perform essential services at customer sites and data centers and so on. So there's that basic. I think beyond that, there is also a need to look at how do you enable work from home. How do you enable the infrastructure that some people might need to be able to work from home long term? So there's that layer. The other layer is what a lot of people referenced, the whole bit about how do I make sure that I do webinars, sessions, manager capability, a lot of the things around mental wellness, right? So important right now. So how do I tweak my benefits programs so that employees can lean on and know that they are cared for and know that the company is being flexible, when the context in which they're operating is so different. So I think these are all layers, but I think at a level of just philosophy, I think in order to do engagement and to care for people and to think about leadership roles, I think leaders have traditionally gone back always to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I don't think that changes. I think if anything, that becomes even more pertinent, because what we do need to pivot to is that employees need to feel empowered.
Yeah.
They need to feel that they have the ability to do what they can in the context in which they are operating. And I think somebody said early on that context is different for each individual. And the bit about purpose is super important, because at least in Microsoft, we are very fortunate. Our purpose is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more.
Mm.
We pivot to that all the time. And in this time, more than ever, because that's exactly what we are trying to do. That's exactly what we are calling upon employees to do, is to empower the planet to achieve more at this really sort of strange, unprecedented time. And so we pivot a lot, and we are trying to lift up thinking a lot to purpose, and that creates engagement.
Yeah.
I think to a far greater extent. And so I think that's one bit. The other is just empathy and grace. We need to give empathy, and we need to give each other grace. Leaders need to give it, managers need to give it, colleagues need to give it to each other. Team members need to give it to their leaders and their managers. So we've got to give empathy and we've got to give grace. In Microsoft, we're absolutely, you have a child, bring them into the call if you're on a Teams call. You have to feed your dog, no problem. Bring him in, we'll say hi to the dog. It's true, right? You've got to work around meetings so that it's not infringing on anyone's lunchtime, cooking time, sweeping, swabbing time. Those are just the realities. And so there's a lot of that. We plan, of course, for a lot of informal chats. We encourage people to call each other one-on-one. It's a simple question. How are you doing? It's not a complicated question. And so to me, I think we continue to recognize that humans are wired for connection. Physical connection. We are made like that. And currently, I think we are all trading across the world in organizations. We are trading on relationships we had made when we had made them in the physical world.
Yes.
Yeah. And we need to build that credit back. And it's going to be difficult because we aren't used to building relationships in a virtual world. And so it's the empathy and the grace and the purpose and the empowerment and the continuous, I think, recognition of the fact that each person is in a unique situation. I think that is what is going to be and is helping us at least to try to keep keep it going.
Okay. All right. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Priyanka, you want to close this section out?
Sure, and most has been said. The way I would say is, looking at the situation and how we as an organization have always articulated our people focus, people are at the heart of whatever we do. We've always said this, but this was the time to showcase it much more than ever before. Employees clearly needed us to exhibit and articulate our employee centricity in much many more ways than ever before. What was important was that we went out, we spoke with them, we articulated, we communicated in many ways possible. And we've always been proud of our culture, but at the same time, we've had many aspects of wellness that we spoke about. But employee well-being was the most important aspect of our strategy today, had to be exhibited. And we launched a full wellness program, catering to employees' physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being. We created various channels and platforms for them to interact, communicate, ask questions, express their concerns with each other, and even we created a 24 by 7 help desk or a program with a vendor saying, okay, reach out if you have a mental issue, financial issue, social issue. So don't just let it stay in and create higher degrees of stress. So that, I think, created a huge amount of safety net for our employees. On top of it, when I spoke about this whole growth mindset, take it as an opportunity and not crisis, we encouraged our employees to look at this as a time to invest in creating a competence shift. So upskilling, reskilling our employees. We created this anytime, anywhere learning platform, which was already existing, but for the roles that they were doing, we told them, don't be boxed into the roles that you're doing. Start creating learning journeys for what will ready you for the future or what your ambitions and aspirations are. And at the same time, we also activated a trump card, which was using our leaders as coaches. It's very easy for employees to get into a negative mindset during this kind of a situation. So we coached our leaders. So all people leaders across the region were taken through a virtual coaching program.
Wow.
Enable them to become coaches for employees, to not just become an emotional coach, but also professionally guide them to ready for the future. Because like we said, the new normal will not be the old normal. And this whole coaching methodology that we imbibed in a journey on made our leaders ready to have those dialogues with our employees. And like I think what the other said, we created interfaces of surveys with our employees to test the waters. What we are doing is right in our own mindset. Did they experience the same output that we were intending to? So those pulse surveys, employee engagement surveys have skyrocketed in our scores, right? But at the same time, it also gave us tangible feedback on what more we could do to be ahead of the game, to meet our employees ahead of their expectations, Ron.
Okay, cool. Manager as coach. That's a cool concept. But what I really liked about what you said was the fact that you developed those managers to become coaches. Because a lot of managers assume they're coaches and they're not coaches, they're managing, which means directing and telling and all those kinds of things. So our discussion is centered around the organization. We've come down to the employees. We're going to turn the last question around as we close out. What changed for you, and what will you possibly change going forward? So let's talk through that for a second. And we're starting out the normal way. Deputy, could you give us some insights? What has changed for you, and how does that look going forward?
Yeah. I think a lot has changed for us personally. Frankly speaking, I really liked what Yuvraj said, that there were these plans, but change would not happen, and then overnight people have started changing. Even for us, we used to always think about plans of doing a new hire assimilation virtually, trying to do engagement virtually, but overnight we had to do it, and everything changed, and we all were adapting to it. So I think that was a big eye-opener for us, that we had all these myths where we felt that these are the things that cannot change and it'll take a lot of time to change. They all happened overnight. The other thing that was a big reality for us was I've heard a lot of people saying that we enabled our managers, we got them to take care of the workforce, but we realized even managers are humans. and they are going through their own stress. So at this point of time, thinking that manager has got some kind of a stick which will, or a magic kind of a thing that everything will be taken care, is not really a reality. You need to first take care and equip the managers to feel engaged, to feel empowered, and feel that they are in a position to virtually connect with the workforce, which is, spread across. So we realized that we need to take care of bite-sized learning with those managers to make them feel empowered and comfortable, and that was a big change and a big learning for us. And what we realized was that there are a lot of things that we are doing now, and that's why we don't have time to do some of the operational things which we felt we need to automate. And we started using chat box more. We are now experimenting with Alexa, trying to see if Alexa can, kind of onboard people and try to help those things. So the reality for us is changing quite a lot. Personally, for me, I'll be honest, it's been a huge change. I don't think so I was connecting with my team members at a very personal level. We were, obviously connecting, but not at, and I realized that all my team members have such great talent that I came to know about them during these times. And you connect at a very different level. And I think while COVID has had its challenges, personally for me, I have more founded respect for the Amazon family.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Adesh.
Yes, I know we are running out of time, so I'll make it quick. I think the first thing is that the leaders are and managers need to be not just um, uh, good intellectually. They just don't need to be sensible alone. They also need to become sensitive, right? So I would just call that as emotional intelligence. So that I think needs to be nurtured much more. I think the second is the workforce is going to change, right? It's not just going to be full-time employees. It is going to be a lot of part-time employees. There's going to be a lot of people could be working half a time, but we're working 2 days a week.
Yeah.
The third is people are going to be freelancers, right? So we already are integrated. Our workforce management system is integrated with one of the world's largest forum of freelancers. They have 13 million freelancers, and we've already done about 100 projects with them. We allow managers to convert a FT budget into a OPEX budget so that they can use a freelancer. So I think we're going to have a lot more freelancers as a part of the workforce. And the fourth thing is I visualize that we'll be hiring employees on a master services contract, which means you just get benefits and you actually get paid based on how much work you choose to do, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the nature of workforce going to change. The third is that the workforce is going to become much more distributed as it becomes more virtual, right? So people, who live in big cities are not living in houses where they can work from home all the time, right? A lot of our people in Mumbai, etc., are already saying it. So as people choose to work more from home, they would tend to move to their hometowns, which will be typically smaller cities. Or yesterday I saw near Bangalore, there's a place called, the name is, it's a big coffee town. And basically it's welcoming people for a workation, right? So we had heard of staycation. Now this is workation. Come there for 10 days, work, and have a vacation. So people would work from places like that. So I think, when people tend to work like that permanently, how do you then engage them at a personal level, right? Life can't be just virtual. As I think someone was saying, it's really a person-to-person connect is very, very necessary. And new employees, we've hired 200 new employees during the COVID times. Now, they haven't met a single soul yet. So how does it work in the future? So I think, how do you create the digital more humane? And how do you mix digital and virtual with physical personal contact? I think is going to be the big challenge.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Animesh.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to keep it really short in the interest of time. I think the big issue is that context has changed. And while we are all struggling with COVID, I think what COVID has done is accelerate certain trends that had already started to impact corporations and society at large, which is broadly the entire tech-led disruption that's playing out in all sectors and all economies. One of the things that we are very, very cautious about is while one does not disregard what's happened as a consequence of COVID, it's also important to not overemphasize some of the change behaviors. Extrapolating changed, whether it's consumer behavior, buying behavior, or employee behavior, of how that's playing out during this pandemic into what will happen in a post-pandemic scenario. A simple question: are consumers going to be extravagant when COVID is over and we get back into any sense of normal? Or will they save more because once you realize that there is a reality of crises that has come home really hard? There isn't clear answer on that. So the important thing is to not recast the whole organization around just what's happened in the last 3 months. So we're really looking at factoring all of this around answering 3 questions. Who are we? Purpose, values, culture. How do we incorporate some of these learnings into that? How do we operate? Operating decisions. How do we bring technology? How do we bring AI, ML, automation? All of those much more sharply into our operating model. And finally, how do we grow? The growth axes and the growth vectors are emerging and changing, and they are no longer the same. So there's been a break and a discontinuity that's happened. So how do we plan for that? So that's the whole framework that's happening. On the employee side, I think we're seeing two things play out, and Adesh captured it in more detail. But just to reemphasize, I think organizationals and employees will, the term that we've come up with is tightly aligned but loosely coupled. So there is alignment around purpose, outcomes, and deliverables, but it's the whole framework that we all must get together in a same physical space, have same kinds of employer-employee relationships will all change dramatically. And specifically in a country like India, one of the big asks that I think will play out is for organizations to step up and fill the gap in public health infrastructure. Organizations will need to take and provide a lot more support to employees around managing health and well-being. Unfortunately, the public health infrastructure is not adequate for that. So that's an axis which we are seeing as requiring a lot more investments that has been made traditionally.
Okay, thank you. Yuvaraj.
Yes, Ron, thank you once again. I think that I'll not say what will change. I think that there's a question need to answer that what should change in terms of working. If you look at the organizations in any country, especially in India, the majority of the organizations which are small, not as big as most organizations would be, right? Organizations like, bigger organizations, conglomerates will not have much of a problem. But the problem will happen in the smaller organizations, which are the whole core of the economy. And that will be with respect to mindset change. I think that in this 3 months lab experiment of work from home, working with various things in a very, very different way, I think after this lockdown finishes, this experiment and this whole theory and processes will get thrown into the uncontrolled environment. And people will start working with those assumptions, what worked at the time of COVID lockdown, will that really continue to work in the normal scenarios or not? And that will be the bigger chaos. And that thing will have to be really managed by business leaders, CHROs, or all the leaders in any organization. And I think what should change finally is to handle it is the mindset of the managers and mindset of the workforce. Mindset of the managers and the leaders, I think people will have to look at people who are not in front of them also productive. Basic mindset happens if you are out of sight, out of mind. If you are in office, you are productive. If you are not in office, you're not productive. And I'm talking about majority of the organizations, not the organizations which are completely in the habit of working with this type of a structure. Secondly, from the employers and the team members side, I think it will be very, very important to own up and build credibility with respect to delivery and ownership. So if the employees start taking more ownership and demonstrate more ownership, and the leaders start having more trust and more empowered environment to work, I think it will work. Otherwise, what will happen is there'll be a huge pull and push for next, I don't know how many months or years, by the time we settle down with and formulate a very different way of working, which may neither be COVID during COVID working or pre-COVID working or post-COVID working. It can come out to be a very, very different formula to operate.
Okay,
That's
great. Great, Yogesh, thank you for that. Amit.
Thank you, Ron. I'll keep this brief in the interest of time, but again, just picking from what Yuvraj said, for me, just looking at everything around and, learning from the insights and experiences that, you have access to in the current times, I think the COVID phase is already being treated as the biggest real life lesson in leadership development that there ever has been, I think, for organizations. Yes. It is because we have seen ourselves on our very best day for an extended period of time. So whether it be working with people, working with the customers, working with the regulators or stakeholders, showing care for employees, just collaborating with each other and realizing a lot of the possibilities that we had only anticipated or imagined in the past, I think have very much become realities. And I think if all of us can find a way to sort of institutionalize those learnings in an ongoing way, we would have shifted, the focus of people practices towards a better future for everybody in a far more impactful way. I think for us in the insurance industry, there are shifts that are definitely there, and these are all shifts for the better. They have disrupted the industry pretty significantly, and I'll just give two quick examples. These are important to, I think about because there are several, innovations and creative people practices arising out of those, which will, shape our ways of working in the future for the HR community as a whole. So I think first and foremost, what was traditionally seen as a push product, right? You have to really persuade customers, you have to really follow up with them, you have to spend enormous amounts of time getting them to appreciate why they should think about a secure future for themselves and their loved ones, is very much a here and now need, right? There's enough and more evidence to already conclude that there is a much higher level of health and life insurance products than there ever has been in the past, right? And the question, therefore, for the industry as a whole is how are we geared to leverage, some of those opportunities in the future? And the opportunity, I guess, it presents, from an employee point of view is, can you creatively look at possibly shifting a part of the fixed cost into variable earnings, right? For at least some part of the workforce who are directly frontline, delivering those sales day in and day out. And if the industry is indeed poised for the growth as it is expected to be, it is a fantastic outcome for the workforce because they benefit from the upside in the near future. So I think that is an innovative opportunity that is there out of the shifts in the industry as a whole. The second, of course, is the rapid adoption of digital work practices, which I think are all out there. Everybody's on the journey in any case. But what was very traditionally seen as a largely face-to-face and a conventional sort of industry, where for more reasons than one, people aggregated together, met together in physical locations, is now moving to a completely different model of working. And I think the opportunity it presents from a workforce perspective is to completely reimagine customer journeys, employee journeys, and be poised for sort of significant growth in the future. So I think there's a whole world of opportunities out there on the people and workforce practices perspective. And I think we're all doing our bit to sort of, bring that to life.
I think I'm getting a note here that we're going to have to close it. We're going a little over time, so I don't know whether we're going to be able to get to I or you are going to come up next. Just let me say this. This has been a masterclass, a leadership masterclass. And I hope CEOs were listening in on this because you guys, your contributions basically created a roadmap for organizations to try and get back on track. Because a lot of companies are suffering, a lot of companies are floundering, and a lot of that has to do with people in those leadership positions that are still in a kind of fixed mindset. So absolutely awesome. And I'm honored to be in the room with all of you. So thank you for that. So I think we're going to be closing out.
All right. Thank you. It was a great opportunity to hear each one of you and your perspectives. So thanks, Ron, for great moderation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron, and thanks, everyone. Nice meeting everyone.
Thank
Ron, you said it. Ron, you said it. Anything I add to this as the host and MC will not be sufficient. This was indeed a leadership masterclass. What you tabled today in just about 45 minutes, each of you, is invaluable. So a big thank you to Ira Gupta, Dipti Verma, Adesh Goyal, Animesh Kumar, Yuvraj Srivastava, Amit Vaish, Priyanka Anand. And let me say in conclusion, Ron, I've watched a lot of panels, I've watched a lot of moderators, and I can tell you that this was a masterclass even for moderators. You were fantastic.
Oh, I'm talking about the group. I thought you were going in that direction. I wasn't talking about me, but anyway, thank you.
I know you did, but that was fantastic. Well done. Thank you to each of you for your time.
Have a good day.
Thank
you. You too.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the Dell Technologies presents the Economic Times Workforce of the Future Summit 2020, this being the third edition. I must mention here that we had over 2,000 delegates, both nationally and internationally, who registered and logged into this virtual summit. And that is very inspiring and encouraging for us to participate in future virtual summits that will be brought to you from time to time by the Economic Times. I must once again thank our partners for making this virtual summit a reality. Title partner, Dell Technologies; Modern Workplace partner, Microsoft; supporting partners, Randstad, Ericsson, and Adobe; knowledge partner, KPMG; association partners, HR Association of India and National Institute of Personnel Management; media partners, Insights Success and Human Capital, brought to you by ET Edge and ET Unwired. I'm sure all of us are leaving with some very important takeaways, which we can in turn implement in our respective workplaces. A big thank you also to all the HR leaders, the panelists, the speakers, the keynote addresses, for sparing their valuable time and joining us on this virtual summit. To all the delegates, please send in your feedback to us. Thank you once again. Have a good evening. Stay safe. God bless.
Listen up, I ain't playing around. I shed blood, sweat, and tears, and I made my rounds. I'm badass, ooh. There's no stopping me. Get out of my way, I'm like a runaway train flying at a supersonic speed. I got what you want, I got what you need, Welcome to the show. Get ready for the major leagues, alright. All my life I said I'm gonna be one of the greats. Now I'm finally here. Ain't nothing about this fake. Oh, it's the real thing. Oh, it's the real thing. Yeah. All my life I said I'm gonna be one of the greats. Oh, it's the real thing. be a mirror, reflect what you are. In case you don't know, I'll be the wind, the rain, and the sunset, the light on your door. I'll be a mirror.
RPCs with built-in AI learn from you, so your selected apps are faster, conference calls are clearer, and more. It improves how you work remotely, so you can work better from anywhere.
I'll be a mirror. I'll be a mirror. I'll be a mirror.
In a rapidly changing world, as we step into a 5G-powered future, your potential to make an impact is endless. You could develop the software that impacts the energy consumption of entire industries, or enable IoT solutions that change the way we track our health, how we commute, or the way we work. You could unlock a new level of connectivity and communication, enabling education, banking, and sustainable development where it hasn't been possible before. Just think, you could be a climate hero. You could be a change maker. You could be a force for good. Join our global team, and you could be the one who did.
Well, this has been an unprecedented crisis for all of us, and that includes Randstad. We began by focusing on safety first. And that really meant that we ensured that our employees, our colleagues around the four corners of India, and of course globally, were safe and in a safe place. And then we moved on to the next stage, which is to ensure that our colleagues were connected. And that's an especially big challenge in a country like India. When you think about we operate across the four corners of the country. So first, we ensured people were safe. Next, we made sure they were connected. And thirdly, we moved on to engagement. And that's where we spent a lot of energy and effort ensuring that our teams were cared for, engaged, and feeling safe as we move forward through the crisis. And of course, the final piece, which is very important, is productivity, to ensure that people can make a contribution in this new world, which is really about working from remote. Sure. Well, I've had quite a journey since I joined Randstad. It's been dynamic. I relocated from Singapore, where I was head of Asia Pacific, covering several countries, doing M&A and organic startups in the recruiting and staffing industry. And then I moved to Japan to be managing director in Randstad Japan of several key businesses, and I was a member of the board. And our presence in Japan was quite large and growing rapidly. And so that was a great experience. And then I had the opportunity to relocate to India to become the CEO and MD of Randstad India. And that was just over 3 years ago that I relocated from Tokyo to India. So I've worked in more than 7 countries around Asia, particularly, of course, being part of a global company like Randstad. I'm also involved with global strategy at the senior level through Europe and beyond. And India, of course, poses unique challenges, particularly when we talk about the recruiting and staffing industry, but also immense opportunities when we think about the average age of the workforce in India at 29 years old, fastest growing workforce in the world. Every month in India, 1 million people enter into the 19 to 59-year-old zone, which is the OECD defines as the working age population. So India is an immense opportunity for our industry, but also comes with lots of challenges. But I must say I'm enjoying the challenge here in India very much. Well, India is, in a way, when we talk about the labor market, in a way, it's a perfect storm. If you think about what I said earlier, the youngest average age workforce in the world at 29 and getting younger, increasing by 1 million people per month. That's almost 13 million people per year. Of course, pre-COVID, the GDP was slotted to grow at north of 7%, was the fastest growing economy in the world. The World Bank still says that India will, post-COVID, recover and will continue to be one of, if not the fastest growing economy in the world. FDI continues to be increasing exponentially every year. Ease of doing business index also jumping double-digit spots. So India, even in my 3 years in India, has really come on the global radar. And what we see is a lot of global companies who have kind of danced around India for many years are now coming in quite aggressively. Now, COVID has slowed things down clearly, but at the same time, we see big opportunities in India for the future of India, and certainly skill in India, make in India are also very important parts of that story. But there are challenges there. We do know that there's a skill gap in India, and it's something that at Randstad, we're working hard to support, to narrow that gap, to ensure that people have the right skills to take India into the future. But again, I think when you simply look at the data around India, and you look at the trends around the economy, the population demographics, and so on, I think India has immense potential. This is not a new normal. In fact, it's a new world, absolutely. And I think we should probably graduate from using the phrase new normal. We adjusted pretty quickly to this new normal, where we were working remotely and using technology to connect. But I think, as we move forward, it's clear that COVID is not going away. We see that in India, but we also see it around the world. There are second waves, and I think the countries that are getting it right now have accepted the fact that we're going to need to live with COVID, and we're going to need to navigate around it and through it, and of course with safety at the core of everything we do. And what I see now for companies, and we'll talk about India now specifically, this returning to work safely mission that we're all on is critical. It's very important now that we all unite. And I say we, I talk about, of course, companies that are starting up their engines again, companies that are looking to grow, of course, sector bodies and the government as well. We all need to be working together to ensure that India gets back to work safely. And Randstad is part of a global alliance with several of the largest staffing and recruiting companies, where we're doing exactly that. We're advising companies and the government sector bodies on how to get back to work safely. And so we're approaching it as Randstad in a, let's say, a way which is based on pragmatic optimism. While we're optimistic, we're also being very pragmatic. We're watching the data, and we're making decisions based on data, and again, with safety first at the core of everything we do. Clearly, the world of work is changing quickly. It was already changing pre-COVID. Technology was being utilized more and more for touch. And at Randstad, we have one of our missions is to utilize and leverage tech for touch. So we've seen that accelerate, particularly with traditional companies that would have been a little bit more analog in the way they operated. They've had no choice but to embrace technology, to deliver service, of course, to communicate, and so on. So I think we're seeing a massive shift towards embracing technology as a good thing, to ensure that we can deliver on the promise to each other, to colleagues, and also to our customers. And I think we're going to see more of that. AI will continue to become important in our world, cloud, and so on. Well, leadership, in its essence, is changing as a result of this new world that we're heading into. And I really believe that leaders need to be thinking more about preparing for not only for tomorrow, but for the day after tomorrow, because the world, pre-COVID, the world was moving very fast. We always talked about how fast the world was moving, but I think we're in a whole different level of speed now that technology has really become center of our lives and the way we work. So I think leaders need to embrace this notion of changing ways of work, hybrid, fluid ways of work, and certainly the CXOs that I meet every day, and I'm meeting them, by the way, like this, via video conferencing. The CXOs I talk to today are rethinking their entire approach to workforce planning. And we talk about temporary, contractual, gig workers, of course, permanent core full-time employees. When you look at your organization, you look at the pie and how it's shaped up, a lot of companies are quite heavy on the core full-time employee and quite light on temp, contractual, and gig workers. And what I advise leaders now to do is think about the workforce from the perspective of future planning and planning for the day after tomorrow. And it's also a bit of a risk hedge as well. That's one key thing. And I think also leadership in general is shifting. Traditionally, the leader was one who had the answers, right? You went to the leader for the answers, partly because of knowledge, partly because of their vast experience. But we have access to information now. It's at our fingertips. It's less about the leader knowing now, and it's more about the leader enabling the teams to shine, to achieve. And I think leaders now, moving forward, need to really think about how they're going to enable their teams to continue to make positive impacts, to continue to be productive in this new world of working from remote. But we are absolutely committed to working with both companies that are growing and have ambitious plans to expand, as well as talent. And we talk about candidates, whether they're temporary workers or whether they're full-time permanent employees. We're committed to supporting both equally on the journey. And for Randstad, it's all about partnering. We're not interested in a transactional relationship. We want to be a partner for our clients in this journey, to advise through these challenging times as we enter into the new world. And so we're putting a lot of resources and energy into that right now with our Safely Back to Work initiative, where we're advising companies on how to do that, how to care for their employees, how protocols and processes, of course, and behaviors which are required. For talent, you know, it's a new world, and also means that job seekers and people navigating their career need to be more agile than ever. And so we're supporting candidates as they look to grow their careers. We're now getting involved in skilling, as I mentioned earlier, helping to close that skill gap. What I really imagine is that when you come onto the Randstad escalator, you come into the ecosystem of Randstad, there's no need to leave. We partner with you on your career journey. We partner with you as an organization as you continue to grow and future-proof and expand into the day after tomorrow.
At Randstad, we are human forward. We believe in the ability of technology to empower human interaction. Through our innovative tools and data-driven insights, we efficiently discover the right fit talent for your diverse requirements. That's how we deliver better quality. A ready-to-work workforce. In our 25+ years in India, we have forged close relationships with 1,700+ companies, enabled over 500,000 placements, and work with 60,000 professionals daily in providing them a pathway to a better life. We combine the power of digital with warmth and accessibility of a personalized touch. We make technology human. We call it Human Forward.